Okay, so I'm ready if you are.
Yes.
Okay. So the main reason that I wanted to meet with you was this idea of networking. I think that some people do it really well, and some people are well-intentioned, but they're not doing it quite as well as they could be. And actually, this morning I met with somebody that runs a private practice, and they were asking me kind of what are the factors that makes somebody successful when it comes to running a private practice, or in running a business in general. And from my perspective, I felt like networking has to be in that mix. So I didn't know if you could speak at all to how networking has helped you build your private practice.
Oh, I think networking is really important. I think we network um, within the group of therapists when we have certain specialities, so people can ask good questions, but also, right, if they have people they need to refer because they aren't in that specialty, then that's a good connection. Um, and as far as how it's net benefited me that I can count, um, I have been a part of BNI, which is Business Networking International. And in, I think my first full year by counting the numbers, BNI accounted for 10% of my income. So that's pretty good referral rate that, when I get to know these other professionals, then they know that their clients need me also.
And then another thing that I've noticed that you do quite a bit, you do a lot of presentations. And I kind of view that as a form of networking. And in fact, I feel like if you're going to attend a conference, that you really should try to put yourself out there to engage with as many people as you can, but in a way that you're giving value, of course. So one of my preferred things to do is either to volunteer for the conference organizer, and then that way I can provide value to them that way, but it also makes me an insider on the event. And that's tremendously valuable when you can show up and already know the speakers that are there. And from my perspective, I think that it's valuable because I get to meet those people ahead of time, and then I can write pieces up and I can help them promote their event. But it also gives me the opportunity to speak with those people ahead of time. So I think that's really important. And I didn't know if how you felt that your presentations have helped your practice.
Well, certainly I get outreach from presentations I've done, months and months ago. Someone will reach out. In fact, we just had a new client in today that's really a result of a webinar I did several months ago. And that they had heard that, and then the timing was right. And so they said, this is what we want to do. And, scheduling is really easy because they'd already known everything that they needed to know to get going.
I knew that we're good networkers. I reached out to people because they have a large following on Twitter. I reached out to people that I knew that they had done a lot of networking to improve their private practices. But then I also reached out to a lot of people that do it professionally. So they market for large organizations. And I tried to stick within the psychiatric and chemical dependency area to kind of keep it relevant, because some marketing is a little bit different. And a theme that I found just across the board was this idea of being curious. And, I always had felt that it was important. And in fact, it's one of the core principles of our company, that I believe in being curious, creative, resourceful, and brave, in that order. And I think that that's what brings value to the market. And you got to add something else in there. And there was always something else that was kind of missing for me. And so after we did all that research, we wrote up an article that we'll link to in this video. But curiosity, every single one of those people brought that up. So we wrote an article, and you read it. And what was your initial response to reading that article?
I don't know. We'll see if I can remember exactly, but more just I guess being concerned that people were going to use curiosity as a tool rather than truly being curious, and not actually be invested in the people they were meeting with, not trying to form real relationships, just using it as a conversation tactic, right? Like a sales tool.
Yeah. And that has always been kind of in my mind, even with our core values for my business. It just has always seemed like there was an element missing. Like you could take those values and take them a really bad direction. Just because you're curious, creative, resourceful, and brave, you could be bringing stuff to market that's not deserved to be there. So then I played around with it. Like, is it kindness that I need to put in there? Is it helpfulness? But that last one had always been missing. And I won't go too much off on a tangent, but this has been really helpful to solidify that in my mind, what that last piece needs to be. And just this morning, I was thinking about it and some of the communication that we had back and forth. And it kind of feels like something like generosity or something like inclusion, in fact, might be an important component.
Inclusion, I like that. I was thinking, or I was hoping you were going to choose integrity. But inclusion makes a lot of sense, especially given what we've been discussing.
Yeah, and the reason that I pick inclusion is actually a nerd reason. It's based on social psychological research by a gentleman named Robert Cialdini, and the other guy, his name escapes me right now. But basically, they were going back and forth between whether they felt like altruism was real. And the end result of this academic fight that they had was that people, when they feel really connected to people, when they're included, the blending between self and other goes away. And then the other person said, yeah, that's altruism. And then, so they just kind of agreed to disagree in the end. But it was that moment when I read that and I thought, I really believe that. My entire life, I always, I think about, and maybe I shouldn't over disclose, but I came from a broken family. So I got to see situations where I was part of the in group and situations where I was not part of the in group. And I think that from learning about that at a very early age allowed me to see group dynamics differently and inclusion and how inclusion works in different situations. So whenever I frame something, I always try to frame it up such that we're all included, because if we're not included, what's outside of that circle is a problem. It's the other, it's something else. And that something else usually turns into the competitor or the enemy or the whatever you want to call it. So yeah, but anyways, I digress a little bit, but
I mean, going back to what you said earlier, that minute or however, 30 seconds, however long you shared that story, like that made it all worth it to me. Like those are such good concepts for me to like have bouncing around in my head and to look into further.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so important to me. I mean, even the very first time that I met Indie Private Practice, I told a story, and the story that I told, there was a couple reasons I told it. It's what got me to where I'm at right now doing digital marketing. But also, I wanted to reframe things in a way that people knew that I care about the work that they do and I care about the industry. So I was maybe selfishly, but I was opening that circle up and pulling it around me as well. I didn't want to be something else. I didn't want to be a marketer or a salesperson. I wanted to be included. And I think that anytime we're having a conversation that's important, if you enter that conversation as an outsider, as somebody, as the other, it's not gonna, you're gonna be the competition. You're gonna be you got to find a way to reframe it to make you a part of the conversation and not the thing that's outside of it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Curiosity in general, has that led to anything? Has it had any significance for you in terms of networking?
Well, I think that's how you learn the things to create real relationships. But in networking and being curious and trying to learn about someone's business, I've learned a lot that's beneficial to me. Right? I mean, thinking of, and I can't think of the exact example, but my financial planner comes to mind as I learned more about his business and what he was doing with other people, not just with me, right? There's like, oh, hey, maybe that would be beneficial. Maybe I should look into that. Or finding things that make sense for my clients too. So I think that's always helpful.
this is one of the principles that I forced myself to engage with when I went to the to this in-arms conference yesterday and the day before. I was kind of tired, and I was sitting there at the booth because one of my clients has a booth there. And, we were kind of doing our thing. And I was like, no, I'm going to get up and I'm going to be curious. I'm just going to walk around the room, and I'm strictly going to focus on learning what each one of these other vendors, what they do, what their strong points are, how, because I might learn something about them that would help me refer, or the agencies that I represent refer into their programs. So that was my only goal, was to get up and practice what we were preaching, and get up, walk around the room, and be curious. A lot came out of that. That my intent was to learn about them, but because I was learning about them, there were opportunities that arose that day that probably will end up in some sort of collaborative work at some point in time. But yeah, just strictly just asking questions, learning, like really, really genuinely trying to learn. And I know that was one of your main concerns, that the curiosity, that it needs to be genuine.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately curiosity is part of how we're forming real relationships. And I think good networking comes out of relationships, right? You're building those relationships, and then they pay off. But that person you met once that you're filing away, you're not actually going to remember them. Maybe you will. Maybe your brain is better than mine. But I have to at least remember and know enough about a person to know to look for their card. Right?
Conferences are a select bit of networking, but honestly, it's where a lot of us do the majority of our networking, which I don't think that we should limit it to conferences. But I was kind of curious to know if there's anything that you do that's different around that area. Me personally, I prepare for conferences. I think most people just show up. But I'll look into the people that are speakers. I'll learn things about them. And then that way, because I'm curious and I want something to say, if I walk up to somebody and say hi, or it's not a conversation starter. But if I know something about them, like the first time we met and had a video chat, I had no idea what brain spotting was. So that gave me a great opportunity to learn something. But if I didn't know that you had done that, we wouldn't have been able to have that conversation. So I didn't know if you do anything that's like preparation for going to a conference or anything like that.
I need to think about that. I'm thinking of some of the most recent ones I attended, or ones I've gone to for years and years. And so that there's less preparation, and it's more about follow-up there. Following up on established relationships, but also new relationships. And also, one of the things I do that's more unique, that counts more as follow-up, is that I always end my presentations with all my contact information. And not just a, hey, like me on Facebook. It's like, no, if you message me on Facebook, I'm going to respond to you. So if you have questions, like, you can get a hold of me. But I put myself out there as available, and I'm not, this grand person you can't ever get a hold of, but so that they know that I'm a resource. I like being able to be a resource. Maybe that would fall under what you were calling the matchers. So as I think about other conferences that I'm newer to, I have done some of that, is like looking up who is there, and what to expect, trying to target the people I may want to have conversations with if I can. Yeah.
Tina Snyder, I used to work for Valley Vista, and Tina worked at Valley. And Tina, she had been there for like 17 years, and she had been a giver all 17 of those years. And she was pulling in more referrals than the entire rest of the business development team by herself. Being a giver, but also being a resource to people is really, really important. It constantly keeps you at the top of people's minds. And I think that was one of Tina's strong suits, that everyone was always contacting her all the time. She didn't have to reach out to people because they were coming to her, asking her, I got this issue. I have somebody that I don't know how to help, and I don't know who can. Who do you know? But because she was such a connector and such a giver all the time, she knew exactly who to refer out to. because she pays attention to all these people when they're speaking. So I think that it was one of the things that made her just amazing at what she does.
Yeah. Well, and because she paid enough attention, she really knew these people, so she could trust to send people to them, right? Yeah. Knowing that they're going to do good work.
Yeah.
Right. I can't send my clients to somebody I don't really know. I don't feel, I want to know that they're going to have a good experience, because who I refer to is a reflection on me too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I won't refer to anyone that I don't feel confident that they're going to do a good job. Something that I find is a struggling point for people as well. When people go to a conference, I carry around this notebook everywhere I go, and I write things down in it. I write people's names down. I'll write down little details, because I wish my memory was better, but it's not amazing. And when you go to a conference that has like 500 people, 1,000 people there, it's really hard to keep details straight. So I jot them down, I take notes, and then I follow up with people afterwards. Sometimes it's just on social media. I'll have taken a picture with somebody and I'll put it out there, or I'll thank them in an email or something like that. Do you have any formal follow-up process, or what are your views on follow-up?
It's probably pretty similar to yours. I don't have a notebook I carry around. Because half the time I'm wearing dresses at conferences anyway. But I will jot down notes, or if there's something that happens, in the moment, we're taking the photos or whatever, and then trying to follow up in one way or another. I mean, sometimes I'm following up with people I didn't actually have a conversation with either. I heard you speaking. I appreciated this. Just wanted to reach out or connect on LinkedIn. I don't really use LinkedIn, but something that's how people would do that, right? And follow them on Instagram, whatever it takes that's going to keep them in my mind, and that I can learn more from them too.
The one thing that I will mention about follow-up, and it's just something I want to talk about, because it's hard for people to do, because there's a certain element of rejection that you feel when somebody doesn't, you follow up and they don't reply back, or you follow up and they say they're not interested in you. And then there's also another avenue. So I think some people are too timid with their follow-up, that they said no, or, I'm just not going to bother them again. And then there's this other side of things where people are hyper aggressive and annoying with their follow-up. And that's even worse. Yeah. So I feel like there's a middle ground that you need to have, that's not annoying, but it's not just giving up either. So my follow-up style, I follow up with people frequently. Like if it's almost all the meetings that I get, I've had to follow up 2 or 3 times. And the reason is because people don't trust you right away. They don't know you right away. And my follow-up, the way that it looks, is not like what most people would think follow-up is. I think most people would say, will you consider our service again, or something like that. And I don't do it that way. So I do collaborative work all the time. So what I'll do, we'll write up an article and I'll send it to somebody, and we'll publish it. And then that person that I've been wanting to communicate with, I'll just send them the article because their friend was highlighted in it. And I'll say, hey, we wrote this. So-and-so was highlighted in it. I thought you might be interested in reading it. And then I'll do little things like that. So it's not even me trying to sell, but over time, they cross paths with me enough and they interact with their friends. And then their friends are like, oh yeah, he's fine. Like he just wants to learn more about what you do and see if we can collaborate and produce some sort of value. So I think the follow-up is an art of being persistent, but not being obnoxious.
Yeah. And I mean, what you're doing is developing some sort of relationship, like, right? You're sending them something that they might find some value in, right? So that's not any kind of direct follow-up. You're just, hey, here's this thing. Or, we're at the same event. Let's have a conversation about nothing, right? And those are the things where you get people to form a relationship, trust you enough, and then we want to talk about these other things.
Absolutely. And another tip that I do with follow-up, and you can't do it without curiosity. So if you're not really paying attention to people, I set a Google alert. I have 2 alerts set, and Matt has other alerts set, depending on what our objectives are and what we're working on. But I always get a Google alert anytime, once a week, for mental health in Indianapolis. And I think the other one I have is substance abuse, Indianapolis, or something like that. So anytime something hits the internet that has those words in it, it sends it to me. And I'll go through them once a week. And because I pay attention to people, I know who would be interested in that article. And I'll just send it out to them. I say, hey, this might be good content for your, for your Facebook page or your followers. Or here's an interesting article, or did you see this? Like this, you might want to be aware that this is happening. And it's relevant to what you do. But it's again, a follow-up that's not annoying. It's not like trying to push you or your services on somebody. It's developing that relationship slowly to where you earn trust. And then the rest of it is just, perfecting what you do and being good at it. So when the time is right, then you can perform and do what you need to do.
Yeah. Well, and I'd encourage people not to be too timid about follow-up, right? And outreach. Most people are, if they're not interested, they're going to ignore you. So you're just not going to see that, have an email in your inbox. Well, we've got plenty of other things to keep us busy. So, don't be afraid. You may as well throw it out there. You never know what grabs people's attention.
I've never done any research on this. Maybe people should comment in the comment section. I'm curious how many mental health professionals or how many therapists in general are more introverted versus extroverted? And
I think it tends towards introversion. In fact, so my mom was a Myers-Briggs administrator.
Oh,
so
cool.
when she got to that certification or whatever it is, she practiced on me. And I was like 12 at the time, right? So starting at age 12 until I started practicing full time, I was an ENFJ. I'm now an INTJ. Now, whether that has to do with the job or other things, but it's very interesting. And I do think I see a lot more therapists who tend towards introversion. And plus, we're supposed to be listening, so you can't be too boisterous.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that's so interesting that this is controversial. So if it makes anyone angry, let me know. Personality is supposed to be static across time. But I know a number of people that they're very heavy with promoting themselves and their business and things like that. And these people swear that they were shy. Like, oh no, I was always shy. And me personally, before I got involved with doing outreach and stuff like that, I was very much like that. I didn't like to pick up the phone to order a pizza. It would literally give me anxiety to order a pizza. And to think that I do all the stuff that I do now, coming from where I was at, it almost feels like it's impossible for you to get to where these other people are doing presentations and stuff like that when you feel that level of anxiety for picking up a phone to order pizza.
Mm-hmm. But the more you practice doing it, the easier it gets, right? So you just have to order a lot of pizza.
That you bring up LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a networking platform.
Right.
And most therapists are on it, but they don't frequently log in. So it has been really useful for me to find people that do little niche type things. So I was working on a project where we're trying to improve a client's services when it comes to behavioral pain management. Well, I was able to find the people that are leaders within behavioral pain management in Indianapolis, because they can find that demographic and you tell it all that information because that's on your resume. But yeah, you can't expect to get any, at least not within the area of like mental health services. You won't get a reply back very quickly because very much.
I'm as bad as everyone else on that one.
Yeah, I frequently, when you're on LinkedIn, you can click on their contact information and that'll give you their email address. And I almost always take the email address, send them an email, or I'll switch over to Facebook because most therapists or most people within the mental health field are on Facebook. So then I'll kind of cross-reference that way, and that's how I get hold.
I've had people really drag their feet on, as a therapist, being on Facebook, and just not wanting to for a variety of reasons. So even as I say, like, well, we've got this great group on here that would be helpful to you. And by the way, that's probably the best way to keep yourself in my mind, right? I don't say that, but that it would help to see you and have conversations with you and know, right? Because we're seeing this all in the group. But I've seen, there's at least a handful of therapists I know who just really drag their feet on it.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious, because my go-to method of getting my message out, or anybody else's message, I'm usually wanting to do in-person presentations. I like to amplify that with social media, stuff like that, to kind of keep myself and whoever I represent at the top of people's minds. Is there anyone that kind of comes to mind that doesn't do any of that? That doesn't do like public speaking, or I can think of a lot of people that don't do social media that are still successful, but they put themselves out there frequently. I almost can't, I'm struggling to find a single example of somebody that doesn't network, that does well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
You're amazing in isolation, you know, it just doesn't work for you. And I think that a lot of people think that if their service is good enough, that it should speak for itself, but it doesn't always. Your service should be outstanding. It should be remarkable. That makes the entire process, it makes the whole process worth doing, right? If you don't have something to talk about, then don't talk. But my apologies if that sounds rude, but I really feel that way. If your service isn't worth talking about, focus on the service first, and then once you've got it in line with, have it being remarkable, then work on some of the other things. But yeah, I don't know a single person that doesn't get themselves out there. A single person that's successful that doesn't actively try to get themselves out there, whether they go to dinner parties or whether they're always, attending events or what it might be.
Yeah.
I think that's the majority of things that I wanted to cover. That if you go to a conference, try to be a speaker. If you can't be a speaker, try to volunteer. If you can't volunteer, at least do your homework ahead of time. Find out who's going to be speaking, what the vendors are that are going to be there, and then go ahead and attend from that perspective. That way, when you engage with people, that you have something relevant to say, and just pay really close attention.
And say something. Ask good questions. Help, take the opportunity to stop somebody and say something.
Yeah, I learned it years ago from when I first started doing sales for my boss, and knowledge didn't really transfer. It didn't cross domains. So when I got over here into the digital side, I started doing all this SEO stuff and making websites rank, and I entirely forgot to ask questions. Like, I just stopped doing it. And on social media, I find this issue of people not engaging like people. Like they don't use the same conversation skills that they have outside of social media within social media. So like how you were saying that if somebody sends you a message that sees you present, you reply back. You'll say something, you'll start the conversation. But there are so many people that won't do that. They post, and they post in a way that it's just about them, and they're wanting, and then if you engage with it, they won't engage back. So I didn't know if you had any, because I know that you have a good social media following. I didn't know if there was, if that was just,
I mean, yeah, you got to engage. I mean, if someone leaves a comment, you like it, like you have to. Like, I don't know. I'm like a Facebook cheerleader, though. I mean, I'm like, I like all the things. Like, good for you, way to go. So I'm probably spreading positivity that way with all the Facebook likes.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I think that we'll end on that note. But if you want more of something, that you should do that for the other person. That reciprocity type thing. If you're not engaging with other people's content, they're not going to engage with yours, or at least not nearly. Maybe your significant other will, or maybe a couple of your closest friends might, just because they know you well. But if you want people to like your stuff, like their stuff, and if you want people to endorse you on LinkedIn, endorse other people. If you want recommendations, give recommendations. That it's a two-way street. And even if you do it way ahead of time, like I give recommendations to people that I've never asked for one in return, but maybe someday I'll be, trying to connect with somebody and they're a mutual friend, because you can see that on LinkedIn. And at that point in time, I can say, hey, would you introduce me to that person? But if you haven't done all the groundwork, building those relationships and giving and doing all that stuff, they're not even going to reply back.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Brooke, I really appreciate your time, and I hope people got some value out of this. There are a few resources that I want to link to. One is the article that we wrote, and I'll also link to this guide that I think is probably one of the best guides when it comes to how to interact in a conference. It's called Being a Conference Commando, and it's by Pete Ferrazzi. He's a famous networker. He does amazing work. And then I'll also link to the book that we read in preparation for this. And the book is by Adam Grant. He's a psychologist, and it's called Give and Take. All right, Brooke. Thanks a lot, and I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, have a great day.
You too.
Bye.